Hi everyone, my name is Leah Kopke and I'm a 3D motion design freelancer. I also have a podcast where each week I cover another 3D modeling tool for Cinema 4D. Welcome! Today we're going to go over the volume mesh tool, and this is a little bit different than the volume builder or the volume mesher, although it is related to those two tools. You may have heard of those before if you've been 3D modeling for a little bit, but the volume mesh is specifically designed for sculpting. It reminds me a little bit of Dynamesh within ZBrush if you're familiar with that software. So if you are coming from ZBrush to Cinema 4D, it's a very similar tool to the Dynamesh. So let's go ahead and jump into Cinema 4D and talk about what this tool does. So here we are inside of Cinema 4D, and you'll be able to find this tool in a few places. You can find it in the mesh menu, right over here, volume mesh. The hotkey for it is UH. Another option is U-Shift-H, but I think UH is a lot easier to remember. And you'll see that we have this little gear icon next to it, which means there's additional settings for this tool that we need to talk about. Now, this tool is primarily designed for sculpting. So the idea is sometimes when you're sculpting, like let's say we start off with a sphere. We add a sphere into our scene. I'm going to change this to be a hexahedron. My display mode I'll change to be constant shading lines. And I'll make this editable by hitting the C hotkey. You can also manually do that by pressing this icon down here. So now we have an editable mesh that we could in theory sculpt. So I'll go over into our sculpting layout here. We already covered the grab brush, so I'll just grab the grab brush as an example, and I'll actually turn on symmetry too, just for fun. We are going to cover symmetry in a lot of depth soon, but I'm just going to grab this, and maybe this is a cat with some ears. I'm just making up things on the fly. So this is our cat. And let's say we were 3D modeling this creature here. Okay, so you'll notice that if I wanted to make a neck now and a body, this would really start becoming very, very stretched out, and I wouldn't really have enough polygons to do that, and it'd be a problem. This is a mess. This is a mess. You don't really want this to happen. So let's say you need this to have more topology. That can happen. We can do that with this tool. And not only can you add on more to this character and give it more polygons, you can merge other objects with it too, which is really cool. And you can avoid that whole stretched out polygon mess that we had shown a few moments ago. So let's go over into our objects. You'll see we have our sphere here, and we need to talk about this tool. So I'm going to hit Shift-C and search for volume mesh. And you'll see that there's this option here, the volume mesh. That's the one we're talking about right now. The volume mesh is a little bit different, but it actually does relate to this tool. So we'll end up talking about it in a couple minutes anyways. But let's go ahead and drag this onto our UI so that it's easy to access and it's there. So here it is in our UI, and it still has this gear icon next to it where we can adjust the settings for this tool. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a couple copies of this so that we can talk about options in this setting for this tool. This is probably more copies than what I need, but that's okay. So let's go over to this guy over here, this first one, our original, and go over the first setting. So the first setting is voxel size. And you might be wondering, well, what's voxel size? So right now it's 3.937 inches. I like round numbers. I'm going to change that to 4, and I'll hit OK. And you'll see this changed. It kind of remeshed it in a sense, similar to the remesh tool that we've talked about in the past. And it's still an editable mesh. It looks very similar in terms of that. I'll hit undo. The next thing that I'll do is I'll change the voxel size to 1, and you'll see it's very different. It's much more detailed. We have a lot more polygons. There's a lot more information that's being saved in this mesh right now. I'll hit undo once again. So that's one of the big differences, is the smaller the voxel size, the more detailed your mesh will be. The larger the voxel size, the larger the polygons will be, the less detail that will be saved. The more polygons you have, the harder it is to make large changes to your mesh. That's good for detail work, like adding in little details to someone's hair, or adding in details to someone's face. But it's usually, you don't want that many polygons until you're way at the end of the process and you're adding in details. It's easier to adjust a lower poly object at the beginning and then add in more polygons later to add in those little details. So that's something to keep in mind as you're working with this tool. Start off low poly. It's a good way to go. You have this other option here called Keep Objects, and this one actually shows how Cinema 4D is doing these calculations and creating this object to begin with when we use this tool. So I'll click Keep Objects. I'm going to change our voxel size to be something a little bit bigger, like 2, and I'll hit OK. So now here we have a different formation. We have a volume builder and a volume mesher. Now, we haven't covered these tools yet. You might know them if you're familiar with 3D modeling with the volume builder and you've done it before, but if you haven't, that's okay. And this could be a whole other topic that's very in-depth, but I'll go over some of the basics with you so that you have an understanding of just how this tool is working in the first place for when you are sculpting, since it's a little bit different than the Dynamesh inside of ZBrush. So here we have the volume builder. Let's turn off the volume mesher so you can just see what's happening with the volume builder. We have the voxel size here, and it's set to 2 inches. And if I zoom in here on this creature that we started sculpting, you'll see that it has all of these little panels. These are like 3D pixels, they're voxels, they're not actual geometry. This isn't a mesh at this point. They're what you'd call voxels, and you could use this for things like clouds and things like that, or creating fog inside of Cinema 4D. There's a lot of other uses for the volume builder than to create meshes. You could think of this as more spatial data that can be used to do other things later. And you can see that our sphere is actually within here. It's a child of the volume builder. The volume builder is using this to create these voxels. And if we change this to be something really big, like 6 inches in here as our voxel size, you can see that those panels are a lot larger. And when we turn on the volume mesher, it's just taking that data from the volume builder. It's taking those voxels and turning them into an actual mesh. So it's taking that data and making it into a mesh. And the larger the voxels, again, the larger the polygons. The smaller the voxels, the smaller the polygons, and the more that there are of them. So you can control really the density of your mesh at this point. And that's the useful part of the voxels. I actually think it'll be easier to show this on a sphere here, this next setting. And I'll make it really kind of low poly. I'll make it 15 segments and I'll make a copy of it. So this first sphere, I'm going to go into the settings and I'm going to keep pre-subdivide off. I'm going to turn off keep objects. I'll hit OK. The other sphere, I'll go into our settings. I will pre-subdivide this and crank this up to 1 and I'll hit OK. The only difference between these two spheres is that this one I did not pre-subdivide and this one I did. And you can see this one on the left is smoothed out. This one on the right isn't as smoothed out. You can actually see where those original polygons were. You can see edges here, where this one's a little bit smoother than that one. So let's talk about why that's happening. I'm going to hit undo so that these go back to how they were. And this time, I'm going to keep the pre-subdivide off, but I'm going to turn on keep objects and hit OK. So this one looks the same as before with the animal down here. We have our volume builder and we have our volume mesher. Now for this one, we are going to subdivide this. Maybe we'll subdivide it twice. And we'll keep object, hit OK. You'll see this one has a subdivision surface added in prior to using the volume builder and the volume mesher. So that's the main difference, is this is just being smoothed out beforehand, and that's why it looks smoother. But there's more than one way to smooth out an object. So I'm going to hit undo so that we have our sphere back here, and I'll change it to be a hexahedron. I'm going to make it editable with the C hotkey. Go into point mode, grab the brush tool, and I'm going to really stretch out the polygons here. Now when you stretch out polygons this much, there's not a lot of geometry here and it's hard to edit anything. This is not a good sculpting mesh. This is a problem. So if we wanted to continue adding on to this, maybe we want to create antlers or something like that, what I would recommend is using the volume mesh in order to add more detail up here. So then we can go ahead and hit OK. And now if we wanted to continue to 3D model and make antlers or something like that, or maybe this is a character's legs, you can. And you can smooth things out and keep building and create whatever you'd like, really. And if you wanted to add on more onto that and you feel like at any point your mesh is becoming a little bit messy, what you could do is go ahead and volume mesh it again. You can volume mesh this as many times as you need in order to create whatever you would like to create, honestly. So you have a lot of options with that. Now I'm going to also show you that you can merge objects together. Like let's say it's just going to be challenging to pull out that surface there, and we just want to add in the body by adding in a sphere and merging it with this fox over here, or cat. I'm still undecided on what I'm creating, and that's okay. So let's say we want this to start to be the body of this creature. And you can even make some adjustments to this and do anything you need to beforehand. So we have our sphere up here and we have this here. We can use the volume mesh And now it's merged these together. They're one object. And then you can go in here with the sculpting tool and smooth this out some more so it's not as noticeable that this is a sphere. And you can continue 3D modeling and adjusting this character here. So you can merge things together. I see artists do this a lot for the hands of a character because it's a lot of work to 3D model a hand. So artists will usually 3D model a hand and reuse it multiple times for more than one character and make small adjustments after. And use something like this, the volume mesh, in order to add on a hand to a character and save some time. So that is the pre-subdivide we've gone over. The last one is the smooth. And the smooth is a little bit different than adding in a subdivision surface. So let's talk about what this does with this model over here. So we have this guy over here. Let's, for this one, turn off the pre-subdivide and turn up the smoothing to 100% and hit OK. So you can see this is pretty smooth, this mesh. And we aren't really seeing those individual polygons here. So what exactly is happening? I'm going to hit undo so that we can turn on keep objects and hit OK. There's no subdivision surface this time. You'll see that there is this thing down here called SDF Smooth. And you can add in this manually down here by clicking on it. And it has a strength. You can adjust the strength of this. And you can actually see this adjusting our mesh. This is with no smoothing on. You can see that the ears are a little bit pointier. The nose is a little bit pointier. When I increase the smooth, the ears and the nose are all becoming a little bit more rounded. So that's what this tool is doing here. The thing about hitting keep objects is that you'll notice that I can't use the brushes on this until I make this editable. So if you choose to keep the objects, eventually you're going to need to click the make editable button or use the hotkey for it, which is C. You can make this editable at any point to start working on it. With the brushes. The volume mesh is a really fun tool to use, and I hope you found this tutorial helpful as you start becoming more familiar with sculpting and begin creating your own models. And I'd love to see them if you have any to share. I'll keep going through more brushes and more options available for sculpting inside of Cinema 4D. All of this information applies to learning how to sculpt in any software because there's overlap between all of them, and the skills you learn in one for 3D modeling definitely carry over to the others. As I said, I learned ZBrush before I learned Cinema 4D, but I definitely felt like what I had learned before taking a class on ZBrush helped me learn Cinema 4D more quickly. So I hope to see you here next time on Ambient 3D Animations. We'll continue going over more options for 3D modeling within Cinema 4D and the sculpting tools. So I hope to see you again soon.